Anna was sitting there alone when two men with bad intentions set their sights on her. They came over and insisted on taking her out to have some fun. Anna politely refused, saying she was waiting for her family. But they wouldn't listen at all. They even thought she was just putting on airs and tried to drag her away by force. Right at that moment, when things were getting physical, a white dog suddenly rushed out. "Let's see who dares try anything now." While Anna was being harassed, young Lucille walked over. Looking at the two strangers, he innocently asked if they were her friends. Anna quickly used the chance to drive them off, saying her family had arrived. But the two men didn't take a child seriously at all. They even mocked Lucille for being short. They only got worse, insisting on taking Anna away right in front of him. Now, they were really asking for it. Lucille's expression changed in an instant. Since he'd confirmed they were bad people, there was no need to hold back. A huge phantom burst out behind him, and the two men didn't even have time to react. Lucille struck directly, moving so fast no one could see it clearly. The man who had been acting arrogant just a moment ago was knocked flat to the ground in the blink of an eye. Only then did they realize exactly what kind of wall they'd run into. Edwin hurried over, still not understanding what was happening, and immediately asked who these people were. Anna was practically breaking down beside them, yelling at him not to start fighting before asking questions. But Lucille immediately started tattling, saying the two men had tried to forcefully take his sister away. The moment those words came out, the atmosphere completely changed. Then the second brother, Julius, made his graceful entrance. He wore a smile on his face, but his words sent chills down everyone's spine. In a gentle voice, he asked whether they should get rid of the two men. Frightened, Anna quickly stopped him, afraid these younger brothers might really attack on the spot. She could only desperately urge the two passers-by to leave while they still could and disappear from sight, or things would truly get out of hand. Then the true final boss arrived. The eldest brother, Wilhart, appeared with terrifying presence and immediately labeled them as kidnappers. That changed everything. The thugs who had been acting so bold just moments ago were scared out of their minds. They could only beg for forgiveness and apologize over and over. In a gentle voice, Wilhart asked Anna whether she had been hurt. But before he could even relax, the younger brothers behind him had already started offering suggestions. Julius smilingly suggested eliminating the problem at the root. Edwin even wanted to break their legs on the spot. Even the youngest, Lucille, had a fierce look in his eyes. Looking at her brothers, Anna felt a wave of unease. Since when had these adorable little brothers become this terrifying? Seeing how fiercely protective they were, Anna was completely stunned. She had never imagined they could become this overprotective. But to talk about how all of this started, we have to go back 2 years to that small village on the northern border. One sentence spoken there completely changed her life. That day, Mother Meg was calmly doing the laundry when she suddenly dropped a bombshell as if it were nothing. She said she was planning to remarry. Anna's mind buzzed the moment she heard it. The news had come completely out of nowhere. But Meg looked utterly calm, as if telling her daughter now wasn't late at all. The reason Anna was so shocked was because she knew her mother all too well. In her memory, Mother Meg was hopeless at housework. She could burn a pot while cooking, and she was an absolute disaster at sewing and cleaning. Looking at the strange lump her mother was proudly showing off, Anna fell into deep thought. Who in the world would want to marry someone who couldn't even take care of herself? Looking at her sleeping mother, Anna couldn't stop worrying. With her mother's complete inability to handle anything, what kind of person would actually want to marry her? In fact, 5 years earlier, Anna had still been a child adopted into a merchant household. Though she had a home and name, she was always alone there. No one cared about her, and no one spoke to her. Until one day, Mother Meg suddenly appeared. That warm embrace became the only light in her dark life. So Anna came to a decision. As long as her mother could be happy, she could accept whoever the man was, even if life turned upside down afterward. But just as she was gazing at the moon and feeling sentimental by herself, who could have guessed that an accident would suddenly occur? Anna had assumed her mother was simply remarrying an ordinary man. But when she stood before that magnificent palace and saw 2 neat rows of maids welcoming them, she realized things were far beyond anything she had imagined. Before she could even process it, a noble-looking silver-haired man stepped out. Without a word, he pulled Mother Meg straight into his arms. His gaze was so tender, it practically dripped with affection. Anna was utterly dumbfounded. What kind of heavenly household was this? A maid beside her calmly informed her that this was the residence of the Duke of Nodenfeld, and that man was the Duke himself. A duke was one of the most powerful people imaginable. Anna froze for 3 seconds, and then one thought flashed through her mind. There was no way this could be real. She rushed up, grabbed her mother, and shouted for her to wake up. In Anna's eyes, how could a man of the Duke's status possibly fall for her hopeless mother? Her mother had to be getting deceived. In truth, Anna had long suspected that Meg's background wasn't simple. Well-dressed people had often visited their home before, but her mother herself was such a naive sweetheart that the fact she'd lived safely until now felt like a miracle. Besides, they were just ordinary commoners. They weren't even from the same world as a great noble like a duke. Anna had wanted her mother to come to her senses, but Meg only smiled gently and didn't treat it as a big deal at all. Just then, the Duke suddenly bent down and looked at Anna with complete sincerity. He said he truly loved Meg and even asked Anna to allow him to become a member of their family. That left Anna speechless. Sincerity really was the ultimate move. Faced with that level of gentle sincerity, she found she couldn't resist at all. Just as she was about to nod, a cold voice came from behind and called out to the Duke. Anna turned and saw a black-haired, stern-faced man approaching. This was the Duke's eldest son, Wilhart. Seeing that cold and forbidding air around him, Anna's heart skipped a beat. Life in a noble household probably wouldn't be simple. The Duke formally introduced him to Anna as his eldest son, Wilhart. Though the Duke was still head of the family in name, he had long since become a hands-off master. All the major and minor matters of the house were managed solely by Wilhart. Who would have thought that the thing greeting Anna the moment she entered the house would be a cold sword? This family was way too violent. Wilhart coldly asked, "What exactly are you after?" Anna was completely stunned. It seemed that trying to build a good relationship with this family was just a daydream. But at that moment, Wilhart suddenly withdrew his hand and said there was nothing valuable in the room anyway. Now it was Anna's turn to be stunned. What kind of person did he think she was? With the sword pointed at her throat, Anna simply laid it all out. She said she had just gotten lost. Who waves a weapon at a defenseless girl? Although Wilhart lowered his sword, the suspicion in his eyes didn't lessen at all. Only then did Anna realize he wasn't just suspicious of her. He doubted her mother Meg as well. To be fair, Mother Meg really was a handful. Not only was her ability to take care of herself practically zero, she hadn't even discussed something as major as remarriage with her daughter. With a mother like that, life in the Duke's household would probably be even harder than Anna had imagined. In the past, Anna had been like an invisible person in her previous home. She had even been ordered to stay hidden in her room during other people's birthday banquets and never show her face. That loneliness of being abandoned by the whole world was something she understood better than anyone. Until Mother Meg came into her life. That gentle Annie, and those heartfelt words, "I love you," became the only light in her dark childhood. To Anna, her mother wasn't just family. She was the life-saving straw she had finally managed to grasp in this world. So no matter how difficult things were now, as long as she could protect that warmth, she would never back down easily. For the sake of protecting her mother, Anna truly went all in this time. She stared straight at Wilhart's blade and insisted that her mother absolutely had not married into this house for money. But Wilhart wasn't moved by that at all. With a cold sneer, he asked how she intended to prove it. After all, there were plenty of people who wanted to attach themselves to the ducal house. Who could say whether that innocent look wasn't just an act? Just as the situation was about to deadlock, Anna suddenly turned the tables. She said, since this marriage was decided by the Duke himself, then by doubting it so much, aren't you basically calling your own father a senile old fool? The logic was flawless. If he admitted her mother was a fraud, that would be the same as admitting the Duke was someone who could be tricked into marriage. Seeing the stiff look on Wilhart's face, Anna knew she had won this round. But the moment the words left her mouth, she wanted to slap herself. In trying to win the argument, she had ended up insulting the Duke too by following that logic through. This wasn't checkmate. It was dancing in a minefield. As Wilhart's expression grew colder and colder, she instantly performed a noble speed retreat. She apologized frantically while explaining that she had only spoken recklessly in the heat of the moment and begged him to please put away that terrifying sword first. Unexpectedly, it worked. Wilhart sighed and really did return the sword to its sheath. Anna thought she had finally cleared this hurdle and hurriedly asked whether that meant he believed her now. But without even turning his head, he tossed out a single sentence. "I have no reason to believe you." So much for that. If she wanted to win this family's approval, she still had a long road ahead of her. Wilhart ultimately did hold back, but he made himself very clear. The reason he was letting her off for now was not because he believed her, but because he didn't want to openly question his father's judgment. After saying that, he walked away without even looking back. No matter how Anna called after him, he didn't spare her so much as a glance. That cold attitude was enough to drive anyone crazy. After finally escaping that suffocating room, Anna had intended to get some fresh air in the garden and maybe find a way back to her room. Expecting that ice-faced man to guide her was pure fantasy. But before she could even celebrate surviving the ordeal, more trouble came looking for her. Just as she was trying to figure out how to get back, a basin of cold water suddenly came crashing down from above and drenched her from head to toe. That was a chill straight to the core. It seemed that in this house, the people who wanted her dead hadn't left, and the people who wanted to laugh at her were already lining up. The culprit behind the water finally appeared. It was actually Edwin, the Duke's third son. The brat sat on the windowsill grinning arrogantly, pointing at the soaked Anna and calling her a thief who had come to swindle the family fortune. So he had seen everything earlier. He had seen Wilhart point a sword at Anna and assumed this commoner would be easy to bully. He even shamelessly declared that since his older brother had no time to deal with her, he would personally take care of her instead. Anna's temper was not about to let that slide. This brat seriously needed a lesson. Taking advantage of the moment, he jumped down from the windowsill and strutted around smugly. She swung back with a perfect counterattack and jammed the empty bucket straight over his head. He had been acting all high and mighty just a second ago, but now he instantly quieted down, with actions rather than words. Anna showed him that if she wanted to survive in this house, meekly enduring everything wasn't going to cut it. When it was time to strike, she had to strike hard. Edwin yanked the bucket off his head and stomped angrily, still trying to threaten Anna with his status. He demanded to know if she had any idea what the consequences of doing that would be. His stubborn refusal to admit defeat was almost laughable. Anna wasn't buying any of it. She went straight for the ultimate move and asked whether he would mind if she went to have a little chat with the Duke. The brat who had been acting so fierce a moment ago immediately fell silent at the mention of telling on him. He started stammering in a panic, desperately insisting that it was only a minor matter. Anna seized the chance and let him have it. "If you know it's just a small matter, then why didn't you think of that before dumping water on me?" Edwin was completely cornered, but no one noticed that behind an upstairs window, there was another small figure quietly watching. It was Lucille, the frail and sickly youngest son of the Duke's family. As he watched the woman downstairs with such explosive fighting power, his eyes were full of curiosity. After a maid discovered him, Lucille shrank back timidly. In a small voice, he murmured that he had heard his father's new wife had arrived. It seemed this new member of the family had already drawn everyone's attention. Lucille only wanted to go say hello, but the moment the word mother left his mouth, the maid beside him instantly changed expression. Her gaze turned so cold it sent chills down the spine. She began mocking him in a poisonous, sarcastic tone, saying the young master was certainly skilled at currying favor, wagging his tail at some commoner of unknown origin. She even brought up Lucille's deceased birth mother and asked how he could dare do this to her memory. The moment Lucille tried to explain, the maid sharply cut him off. Gripping the child's shoulders tightly, she guilt-tripped him word by word, reminding him that his mother had died because she gave birth to him. This kind of psychological manipulation was suffocating. She forced Lucille to admit he was wrong and forced guilt onto him. As if the moment Lucille longed for even a little warmth, he was betraying his real mother. Only when Lucille apologized over and over in fear did the maid finally seem satisfied and put away her fangs, replacing them with a gentle mask once more. In this seemingly splendid ducal mansion, the truest malice was often hidden among those closest to you. Leaning close to Lucille, the maid spoke the cruelest words in the softest voice. She told him he was a hopeless piece of trash, capable of nothing but failure. It was cruelty that struck straight at the heart. She wasn't just trying to destroy the child's self-respect. She was trying to completely restrict his freedom. She warned him that without permission, he was absolutely not to step outside his room. Before leaving, she twisted the knife one more time, saying it was all for the sake of the ducal house's reputation and that she didn't want him becoming the family's disgrace. That kind of control disguised as protection was what made it most despairing of all. As the door slammed shut, Lucille was left completely isolated in the darkness. In a place that should have been a noble home, he was more like a prisoner with nowhere to run. Who knew how many days like this he had already endured? By the third day after arriving at the Duke's house, breakfast was unbearably awkward. Though they were supposed to be one family, the dining table was cold and silent. The Duke helplessly apologized to his daughter, but Anna knew full well those two older brothers weren't shy. They were clearly avoiding the elders. What irritated her most was that the brothers acted obedient in front of their parents but completely ignored her. The waters in the ducal household were even deeper than she had imagined. As they kept talking, the conversation turned to the youngest son who hadn't shown up at all, Lucille. Apparently, the child had always been in poor health. The Duke sighed and said that Lucille's mother had died when he was born and that he himself hadn't been able to pay much attention to him. So Lucille had been left in the care of a maid. Just then, Meg suddenly said she wanted to meet the child before leaving. Anna was completely stunned. Leaving? What was that supposed to mean now? Who could have guessed that this Duke and Duchess were the hands-off type? With a smile, Meg announced that next week she and the Duke would be going on their honeymoon. Anna was totally dumbfounded. They had said they were going to inspect the territory, but in the blink of an eye, they had just dumped her here and left. Sure enough, once the pillars of the household were gone, Anna's bad feeling came true. The atmosphere in the ducal residence instantly became wrong. She only wanted a drink of water, but the maid in front of her didn't even look up. In a voice as cold as ice, she simply told Anna to go find the kitchen herself. Anna had barely started to ask where the kitchen was when the maid turned and walked away, clearly not taking the new young lady seriously at all. It seemed the real test in this house was only just beginning. Being treated like air by the maids gave Anna a real headache. But deep down, she actually understood very well why the maids disliked her. They had all started from the same commoner class. So why should you suddenly transform and become a young lady we have to serve? Anyone would feel resentful. And worse was still to come. As soon as night fell, Anna found herself plunged into darkness. She realized she couldn't even light a lamp. In this country, all everyday tools were powered by magic. But Anna happened to have no magic at all. The old-fashioned items that didn't require magic had long been phased out by the times. Looking at the room full of magical lighting fixtures, Anna was completely at a loss. In this mansion where everything revolved around magic, it seemed she wouldn't even survive the night without some real capability. Staring at the ornate magic lamp, she truly had no idea what to do. She tried to sense it the way others did, but after struggling for a long time, the lamp didn't even produce a spark. Just as she'd expected, without magic, it was nearly impossible to function in this house. But she couldn't exactly sit there in total darkness forever. So she decided to grit her teeth and try one last time. If magic wouldn't work, then she'd have to rely on the most primitive method, feeling around the base of the lamp for some kind of mechanism. She took a deep breath. Success or failure would come down to this. Then came a loud bang. The lamp did light up, but the commotion was far too big. It was like setting off a firecracker in a silent corridor. And that caused real trouble. Sure enough, the cold-faced maid from before was drawn back by the noise. Seeing that murderous expression on the woman's face, Anna knew this was probably impossible to explain away. With a sharp crash, the expensive magic lamp shattered all over the floor before Anna had even recovered. The maid's shriek came first, demanding to know what she thought she was doing. What embarrassment. Anna had always been clumsy since childhood. Anything that involved magic never ended well in her hands. Even her household brothers had looked down on her for it before. The maid complained while driving her out, saying she had broken a treasure of the Duke's household and telling her to get out of the way. Anna could only lower her head and apologize, chased out like a scolded child. It wasn't until she was walking down the corridor that she noticed her palm had been cut. The sharp pain cleared her head considerably. If she had known this place was full of traps at every turn, she should have brought an ordinary oil lamp from the start. Driven out of her room, she wandered aimlessly through the garden. In this mansion obsessed with bloodline and magic, where could someone like her, the so-called young lady in name only, possibly hide? Even though the maid had chased her out, Anna stayed fairly calm. If they wanted to clean, she might as well get some fresh air in the garden. But after only a few steps, she spotted a suspicious figure skulking in the bushes. The silver-haired little boy looked panicked, muttering that he needed to hide. Anna recognized him at a glance. Wasn't this Lucille, the Duke family's sickly fourth child? But before she could even greet him, Lucille reacted as if he'd seen a ghost. "Charlton, I'm sorry." He turned and ran off so fast he vanished. That left Anna standing there doubting herself. Did she really look that scary? Just as she was feeling frustrated, something tugged at the hem of her skirt. When she turned around, she saw a scruffy little wolf staring up at her with wide eyes. The little thing was surprisingly bold. Not only was it unafraid, it kept rubbing itself against her. Anna picked it up naturally. Who would have thought that in this cold and indifferent ducal mansion, the first warmth she would receive would come from this little creature she found by chance? Looking at the little animal snuggling in her arms, Anna suddenly realized something. No wonder Lucille had been so flustered earlier. The secret he had desperately been trying to hide was this little wolf. Before she could dote on it enough, a voice suddenly sounded behind her. It was Edwin, the Duke's third son. He appeared and demanded to know what Anna thought she was doing. Edwin pointed at the animal in her arms and said he was going to tell on her to Will Hart. Startled, Anna rushed over and clapped a hand over his mouth, begging him to please keep it secret. But what Edwin said next left her frozen on the spot. He told her that this was the dog belonging to the Duke family's youngest son. To protect Lucille's secret, Anna was really giving it everything she had. She tried every soft and pleading tactic on Edwin, saying everyone had kept pets in secret from their parents when they were young and asking him not to tattle. But Edwin wasn't moved at all. He thought Anna was just acting and even mocked her for sticking her nose into things that weren't her business. Why care about some freak who had never even shown his face? Anna had barely opened her mouth to argue when Edwin shouted that Lucille was a useless shut-in who never left his room. So how could he possibly be raising a dog in the garden? The moment those words came out, both of them froze. Anna instantly sensed something was wrong. If Lucille never left his room, then who was the boy she had just met in the bushes? Had that child been secretly locked up in his room all this time? Realizing he had let something slip, Edwin's face changed. He tossed out a threat and then bolted. Watching his retreating back, Anna felt even more uneasy. Just what had this family done to that little boy? Lucille had just slipped back into his room, his mind still full of that new older sister, when he turned around and was caught red-handed by the maid waiting at the door. Trouble had truly arrived. In a chillingly cold voice, the maid demanded to know why he had disobeyed when he had been forbidden to leave the room. Lucille could only hang his head and keep apologizing. But what came next was the real knife to the heart. The maid viciously reminded him that his birth had caused his mother's death. She said the Duke refused to see him because he hated Lucille for taking away the woman he loved most. She even threatened him, saying that once the eldest son inherited the title, someone unnecessary like him would be thrown away for good. Seeing Lucille too frightened to move, the maid changed to a hypocritical expression again and pretended to comfortingly embrace him. This suffocating mental abuse played out in this household every single day. No one came to save him. No one cared whether he lived or died. Lucille could only respond like a puppet, hopelessly agreeing to the contract of being a good child. But the maid's punishment wasn't over. She not only withheld Lucille's dinner, she also forced him to rehearse his story again and again, making him lie to Will Hart and say that he was happy every day. Watching Lucille numbly repeat the lines, the maid still found it insufficient. She forcibly pulled at the corners of his mouth, making him show a bright smile. She even brainwashed him, saying that she alone was the one who truly cared for him. This nauseating performance repeated itself over and over in the dark room. Meanwhile, at the other end of the corridor, Anna, thirsty in the middle of the night, was heading downstairs in her robe to find some water. The already quiet ducal mansion felt especially eerie at night. As Anna walked, she found herself wondering why there was a strange glow at the end of the corridor when she clearly remembered nothing being there. What she never expected was that the faint light at the far end was Lucille collapsed on the floor, clinging to life. The child was curled up on the cold ground, already half unconscious. At that moment, Lucille was enduring a double torment. The pain in his body was so intense he could barely breathe, while his mind was full of the maid's murderous words that he'd killed his mother, that he was unwanted baggage. Those vicious curses were like shackles dragging him into the abyss. Just when he was about to give up struggling, a warm embrace suddenly caught him. Anna held the trembling child tightly and gently guided him again and again in his ear, telling him to breathe slowly with her, telling him that it was all over now. That long-forgotten warmth, completely free of malice, left Lucille dazed. He struggled to open his eyes, and, seeing that familiar orange hair before him, unconsciously called out a title he had long buried away. He mistook Anna for his dead mother. The warmth, rising from the bottom of his heart, finally drove away all the cold around him. Anna finally found his room, but what she saw made her uneasy. This hardly looked like a little child's room. It was too clean, so clean there wasn't even a single toy in sight. Just then, Lucille reached out in his sleep and grabbed her hand. Even in his half-conscious state, he was murmuring for his mother. This child must miss home terribly. But the next words, "I'm sorry," were even harder to hear. What had he gone through to the point that he apologized even in his dreams? So Lucille's background was this tragic. His mother had died giving birth to him, and for various reasons the Duke had failed to give the child even a little care at the time. As Anna listened to this history and looked at the little figure curled up before her, the last of the defenses in her heart finally crumbled. She decided to stay, even if only for a little while. But that little while turned into dawn. Taking advantage of the maids still being asleep, she hurried and slipped back to her own room, thinking she had done it without anyone knowing. But how could she know that behind that half-concealed door, a pair of eyes had been watching her for a long time already? Her secret nighttime actions had probably already reached certain people's ears. Early the next morning, Anna came over on the pretext that she was worried about Lucille's health and wanted to see whether he was feeling better. But the maid's attitude was ice cold. She clearly had no intention of letting Anna enter so easily. Just as the atmosphere grew tense, Lucille unexpectedly came out by himself. The child was still as polite as ever, but what he said next stunned everyone present. He actually thanked Anna for last night and said he had caused her trouble. That did it. The midnight meeting that had been meant to stay secret was instantly exposed. The maid saw everything clearly from the side. This was a child who usually barely dared speak, yet today he had taken the initiative to talk to someone and was even trembling slightly. It seemed that what had happened last night had already aroused certain suspicions. The coming days probably wouldn't be easy. Anna really was a whirlwind by nature. Before the maid could react, she proposed taking Lucille out for a walk. The maid had just opened her mouth to invoke the rules, when in the very next second Anna simply scooped the child up in her arms and ran. At that point, no one could stop her. She carried Lucille as she ran and finally found a secluded place with no one around. But the child still looked as cautious as ever. The first thing he said was another apology, saying he had caused trouble yesterday. Anna felt her heart ache hearing that. That wasn't causing trouble. It was heartbreaking. She quickly comforted the little boy and told him he hadn't done anything wrong at all. But looking at Lucille's frightened expression, Anna suddenly realized something. The fear in this child's heart was probably far deeper than she had imagined. Anna didn't care about anything else and carefully checked Lucille over, only relaxing once she confirmed he wasn't hurt. Her bright smile shone into Lucille's heart like sunlight, letting him feel for the first time what true warmth was. To help him relax, Anna even brought out some bread and suggested they go feed the little dog together. Lucille seemed a little timid, but he obediently followed her anyway. Who could have guessed that this gray wolf, which looked a bit fierce, would become especially docile the moment it saw the bread? It even started acting spoiled around Lucille, making the child giggle with laughter. Seeing Lucille finally smile, Anna at last let go of the worry hanging in her chest. On that sunlit patch of grass, all the fear and unease seemed to temporarily disappear. But could such peaceful days really last forever? Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why did this dog look a whole size bigger than yesterday? Before she could think it through, a familiar voice suddenly came from behind. Edwin, the Duke's third son, had shown up at that exact moment. This young master had quite the temper. The first thing he did was fixate on how she addressed him, insisting that Anna call him my lord. Anna inwardly groaned. Was this guy here to pick a fight again? But then Edwin abruptly changed tone and stared at the gray wolf, saying this was Lucille's magic beast. Anna was completely dumbfounded. So the thing she had been playing with all this time was actually a dangerous creature. In their world, magic beasts all contain magic within them. Once that power went out of control, they could turn into monsters that attacked humans. And the transformation was completely unpredictable. Looking at the gray wolf before her, Anna felt a surge of lingering fear. With such a large creature by his side, was it protection for the child, or a ticking threat that could explode at any moment? Edwin's explanation carried a lot of information. It turned out magic beasts survive by feeding on their master's magic. No wonder Anna had been feeling tired these past 2 days. That little thing had basically been using her as a battery pack. Seeing the stunned look on Anna's face, Edwin couldn't help letting out a sigh. He admitted that the reason he had been so hostile yesterday was because he had suspected Anna of being a beast tamer with ulterior motives. But now it seemed this woman was simply absurdly open-hearted. Anna wasn't angry at all when she heard that. Instead, like a big sister, she praised Edwin for knowing how to protect his family at such a young age. That instantly set off the Thunder-a-Little Lord. He jumped up angrily, insisting that his mental age was much older than Anna's. Just as the two of them were bickering, Anna suddenly dropped her smile and asked a question that made the atmosphere freeze. She asked whether it was normal here for a maid in a noble household to be called madam. The moment those words came out, Edwin froze too. Edwin gave a firm answer. In the Duke's house, absolutely no one would call a maid madam. That made Anna unable to sit still any longer. If that title was wrong, then why was Lucille using it? Fragments of memory came flooding back at once. In that dim corridor, young Lucille had actually been kneeling humbly on the floor. He cried and begged that maid to stop, and the title he used was that absurd form of address. But not only did the maid not stop, she turned around with a dark expression and threatened him in a voice full of menace. She demanded to know why Lucille had ignored her warning and gotten close to that woman, Anna. A maid, someone who should have been serving others, actually dared to show such possessiveness toward the Duke family's young master. She was even delusionally trying to take the place of the lady of the house. At last, Anna saw clearly the kind of sunless life Lucille had really been living in this family. And that maid's true face was probably even more frightening than a magic beast. That maid's heart had already become completely twisted. Listening to Lucille's collapsing sobs, she found them as pleasing as music. In her eyes, the Duke family's little young master was nothing more than an expensive toy she could play with however she wished. What she enjoyed most was the way Lucille couldn't live without her. No matter how badly she tormented him, Lucille still instinctively trusted her. That sick dependence had lasted far, far too long. But Anna's appearance made the maid feel a threat unlike anything before. Seeing Lucille in that woman's arms, she ground her teeth with hatred. She would never allow anyone to steal her prey. She deliberately cornered Lucille and, in a voice so gentle it made the skin crawl, asked the little young master whether he thought she was bullying him. Wasn't she the one he liked best? Lucille had long since been terrified out of his wits. He could only repeat her words like a puppet, admitting that he liked this demon and even calling her madam. The maid smiled with cold satisfaction. She told Lucille that it didn't matter if a toy was broken. As long as he behaved, she would buy him a new one. These mental shackles were slowly dragging Lucille completely into the abyss. This maid was rotten to the core. She didn't just want to control Lucille himself. She wanted to destroy the last thing he cherished in his heart with her own hands. Right in front of Lucille, the bell carrying the memory of his mother was hurled hard to the ground. Looking at the bell broken into several pieces, the maid not only failed to stop, she began an even crueler round of psychological torture. Putting on a false look of regret, she said, "Oh dear, this was the treasure your mother left you, and now it's broken just like that." That single sentence became the final straw that broke the camel's back. Lucille's whole body went stiff. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to gather the pieces back up. But that overwhelming sense of guilt instantly swallowed him whole. Lucille's mental defenses completely collapsed, and the maid simply stood there coldly, watching the poor child struggle in agony, as if all of this were nothing more than a casual piece of work she had completed. Who could have imagined that in that suffocating room, the real god of death would crash in through the window? A giant red-eyed wolf tore through the darkness and lunged straight at the maid. At the critical moment, Edwin slammed the door open and rushed in. The sight before him stunned him completely. The maid's arm was already stained red with blood, and she was so frightened she could barely speak. Edwin didn't have time to think. In a single stride, he rushed to Lucille's side and firmly shielded his utterly broken younger brother. But the magic beast had no intention of sparing them. It lowered its body and let out a chilling growl from deep in its throat. That cold breath, carrying the scent of death, had already blown onto their faces. This midnight in the Duke's house was destined to be dyed red with blood. Things were growing stranger and stranger. Edwin realized that this ferocious magic beast had an unusual obsession with the unconscious Lucille. It wasn't hunting him. It was clinging to him. Looking at Lucille, who couldn't even stay upright, Edwin tried to reach out and pull him over, but the magic beast gave him no chance. It suddenly opened its blood-soaked maw and released a thunderous roar. The situation had instantly reached a life-or-death point. Edwin could only protect them with all his might. He had even prepared himself for the worst. But at that critical moment, a familiar figure stood in front of them. It was Anna. She actually walked straight toward the magic beast. No weapon, no fear, just a gentle sentence. "It's okay now." In that instant, all the killing intent vanished. Anna's smile became the only salvation in the darkness, turning what had been certain death into a sudden chance for hope. It had all started on a gloomy afternoon. Lucille looked out the window and spotted a little creature lying on the grass. It looked like it couldn't hold on much longer. He hurried downstairs, and who would have thought that the little wolf would slowly open its eyes and even come closer on its own? From that day on, Lucille had a secret of his own. He hid it from everyone. He secretly played with the little creature. In a soft voice, he asked, "Are you all alone too?" No one knew that such a tiny act would completely change his fate. In Lucille's heart, that little wolf was like another version of himself, the only treasure he could hide away during his lonely days. Those times together had become his most precious memories. But who could have imagined that the once gentle little creature had now completely changed? In an instant, reality completely shattered the illusion. Before Anna could react, a sharp pain shot through her arm. Blood dripped onto the marble floor. What had happened to this child? The scene instantly erupted into chaos. When Edwin rushed over, he froze on the spot, staring at that injured arm. Even his voice trembled. "Lucille, are you hurt?" Lucille stared fixedly at the blood before him like a soul lost from his body. In a small voice, he murmured that it was all his fault. All his fault. At that moment, Anna endured the agony and gently interrupted him. She softly said, "No, that's not it. This is not your fault." No one could have expected that, at a moment like this, the first thing Lucille thought of would still be comforting someone else. Forcing a smile, Anna quietly told Lucille again that it truly wasn't his fault. But the wolf only bit down harder, and blood had already soaked through her sleeve. Just then, the door was violently thrown open. Guards carrying bows rushed in. When they saw the miserable scene before them, the guards shouted, "Young Master Lucille, are you all right?" They stared at the blood-mouthed magic beast with killing intent in their eyes. That beast had dared attack its master. It absolutely could not be spared today. Just as the blade was about to fall and the wolf seemed doomed, Anna suddenly shouted, "Wait." No one had expected that Anna would spread her arms and firmly stand in front of the wolf. "You absolutely cannot kill him." The guards all thought she had gone mad. She was clearly covered in blood from being bitten, yet she still wanted to protect this vicious beast. Just then, the maid nearby suddenly let out a cold laugh, as if she had seized the perfect opportunity. She immediately dumped all the blame onto Anna and loudly accused her. "This was all your plan, wasn't it? Surely when you took the young master away, You did something disgraceful to him. The maid's false accusations pressed in step by step, but Anna had no way to refute her, because deep down, she knew that if she told the truth now, Lucille would be forced to take the blame for the wolf. Faced with such a dead end, what could she possibly choose? Anna was still weakly trying to explain that this truly wasn't the wolf's fault when a cold voice suddenly cut through the room and silenced everyone. What exactly happened here? Well, Hart was back. No one around even dared breathe. Seeing the wreckage all over the floor and his injured younger sister, his eyes turned cold as ice. He stared at the magic beast, his voice full of pressure. You actually allowed something like this into the Duke's residence? At this critical moment, that maid suddenly stepped forward. Pointing at Anna, she shouted, "It was her. This young lady is the one who let it in." Now it was truly over. Colluding with a magic beast was a serious crime. Anna couldn't defend herself, no matter what she said. Would Will Hart really believe such a vicious lie? Seeing the blood on Anna's arm, Will Hart's gaze darkened completely. Before she could even speak, the maid struck again and shamelessly reversed the blame. She screeched that Anna had brought the injury upon herself, that she had deliberately staged this whole scene to deceive the young master. At that moment, Lucille finally exploded. He loudly refuted her, saying it was all lies. Will Hart ignored the shouting and instead turned to stare fixedly at Lucille, who was hiding behind the others, demanding that he explain everything himself. Lucille was so frightened that his whole body stiffened, but he still stood protectively in front of the wolf and softly revealed the secret. This wolf wasn't some culprit. It was his only friend. The entire room fell into dead silence. Will Hart looked at the wolf on the ground, and a terrifying pressure seeped into his voice. If it's your friend, then why has things become like this? Lucille froze. Will Hart's voice was as cold as ice. Looking down at him from above, he placed every bit of blame directly onto this 7-year-old child. You bear full responsibility for this disturbance. Your selfishness got someone hurt and threw the entire Duke's household into chaos. Lucille lowered his head and meekly accepted it all. He even called him Brother Will. Anna, standing nearby, was completely stunned. She couldn't believe her ears. Lucille was obviously the victim. So why was he the one being forced to take the blame? Will Hart turned to look at Anna's steadily bleeding arm, and his tone softened slightly as he told her to hurry and to get it bandaged. But it was as if Anna had become a different person. She flung his hand away and shouted that it wasn't important. Right now, she had only one thought in her mind. What exactly was wrong with this family? Why was everyone blaming Lucille? Looking at Will Hart's matter-of-fact expression, Anna knew that if she didn't stand up now, Lucille's whole life would be ruined. Anna completely blew up. Looking at that scheming maid and then at the ice-cold Will Hart, she could hardly believe what she was hearing. She loudly demanded to know how a child as young as Lucille could possibly be at fault for something like this. Will Hart tried to pressure her with his authority, frowning as he told Anna to be quiet. He said she would faint from blood loss and needed to get treated immediately. But Anna wasn't having any of it. She pointed right at Will Hart and scolded him, saying all he knew how to do was put on that cold, lofty act. Lucille was still just a child. What did he know about taking responsibility? After a long silence, Will Hart finally forced out a single sentence. This is simply the fate of being born into the Duke's family. That line instantly lit the fuse. With a cold laugh, Anna shot back. If you care so much about responsibility, then did you ever teach him what to do? Other than standing there coldly watching, what responsibility have you fulfilled as his older brother? Her final words ripped away the Duke family's last fig leaf. She said she didn't care about their so-called honor at all. All she saw was a heartless madman. Will Hart was left speechless, looking at Anna's blood-covered hand. Even his gaze finally began to waver. Anna was still forcing herself to stay upright as she pointed at the terrified Lucille and demanded to know why Will Hart wasn't first showing concern for his own younger brother. Will Hart had no answer. Looking at the stubborn girl before him, he felt at a loss for the first time. But just then, Anna's voice began growing fainter. She felt the world spin around her, and the scene before her started to blur. She wanted to say she was fine, but her body had already stopped obeying her. The after effects of losing too much blood hit all at once, and she no longer had the strength even to stand steadily. At the moment she was about to lose consciousness completely, Willhart suddenly rushed forward and caught her tightly in his arms, shouting her name in alarm. In the end, Anna could no longer hold on. In the middle of the chaos, she lost consciousness completely. Anna had been seriously injured, and Willhart finally exploded. As the beast seemed about to lunge again, Lucille let out a terrified scream. The situation had reached its most dangerous point. No one expected Willhart to strike so ruthlessly. With a single blow, he sealed the monster completely. The crisis was temporarily resolved, but the order he gave next sent chills down everyone's spine. Lock up this beast as well. But then, how should that child be dealt with? Anna's injuries were very serious. Willhart immediately ordered someone to fetch a doctor and have her settled in a guest room. But even in that state, she couldn't focus on her own wounds and instead loudly demanded to know why no one was checking on Lucille first. A lot of people couldn't understand why Willhart was always so cold. In truth, the answer had already been there since his childhood. So I hear you and Julius had a fight. Their mother had once tried to persuade him, saying he was far too harsh with the people around him, especially with his own family. But the young Willhart had thought that if he couldn't even be ruthless with his own family, then how could he ever command the respect of his subordinates in the future? Since he had been born into the Duke's family, then it was only natural that he would have to give up certain things. His mother didn't refute him. She only gently stroked his head and said that there was nothing wrong with his determination. But some truths are only understood after you've truly lost something. Anna lay on the bed, still murmuring weakly under her breath. Seeing her like that left Willhart, standing guard by her bedside in silence. His mind was full of the image of the frightened Lucille. This family could not withstand any more turmoil. Fortunately, the butler arrived in time with the doctor. Willhart didn't stay long. He merely coldly tossed out, "I'll leave it to you," and then turned to leave. The calmer he acted, the more frightened everyone around him became. Just then, noisy shouting suddenly came from outside the door. Edwin was charging over, ignoring all attempts to stop him. Edwin had finally snapped completely. Faced with the maid's so-called kind attempts to calm him, he wouldn't listen at all and instead shouted for everyone to get out. In his eyes, Lucille and that injured woman needed the doctor's care far more than he did. He just wanted to be alone. But the moment everything went quiet, his mind filled with the chaotic scene from before. Anna, recklessly confronting him to protect the child. It stabbed at his heart like a needle, and Lucille's desperate scream still echoed in his ears. He slammed his fist hard against the wall. He knew he wouldn't get over this anytime soon. Edwin felt utterly useless now. In that chaos just now, he hadn't helped at all. The moment his eldest brother stepped in, he took control of everything. Even Lucille, who was usually the most timid, hadn't backed down this time. Even that woman had shown more courage than he had. Being left behind by everyone made him feel awful. He had originally wanted to go check on things in the room, but as soon as he reached the door, he heard the servants gossiping inside. Someone was whispering that the doctor was busy treating that prostitute, meaning Anna. Hearing that, Edwin stopped in his tracks. These people were getting bolder and bolder. The servants huddled together in the hallway, whispering viciously. Not only did they talk about how deep Anna's wound was, they even smugly said that if a scar remained on her face, she'd never be able to wear pretty dresses again. Even worse, they thought that was a good thing. They said it would finally give them an excuse to lock up this so-called commoner's daughter. Edwin heard every poisonous word from where he stood hidden in the shadows. He clenched his fists so tightly it was obvious he was nearly at his limit. Meanwhile, young Lucille had been shut in his room. The maid hypocritically told him to rest while forcibly tucking him under the blanket. Lucille lay there, but in his heart he simply couldn't stop worrying about the woman who had saved him. In a small voice, he asked the maid how Anna was doing. The maid smiled easily and said the doctor had already seen her, so he shouldn't concern himself with it and should just close his eyes and sleep. But how could Lucille possibly sleep? The moment he closed his eyes, all he saw was Anna standing in front of him, protecting him, smiling at him so gently. He had never felt that kind of warmth before. After the maid left, Lucille couldn't hold back any longer. He threw off the blanket and quietly slipped out of bed barefoot. He wanted to see for himself how the sister who had been hurt saving him was doing. But the moment Lucille slipped into the hallway, a voice behind him caught him red-handed. He froze in fright. When he turned around, he saw that it was Edwin, who apparently wasn't asleep either. Edwin told him not to panic, and specifically warned him that their eldest brother absolutely could not find out about this. He saw right through Lucille at a glance, and knew the little boy wanted to see Anna. Looking at Lucille's timid, apologetic expression, Edwin clicked his tongue in annoyance. But what he did next was unexpected. He pulled a delicate pendant from his clothes and shoved it into Lucille's hand, saying Lucille had come at just the right time and could bring this to that woman for him. Lucille stared at the pendant in his hand, stunned. Who would have thought that the usually cold Edwin would secretly send something to her? After handing it over, Edwin gave one brief instruction and turned away, leaving Lucille standing there alone, clutching the pendant tightly. He gently pushed open the door and finally saw Anna sleeping. She lay there quietly on the bed, looking terribly weak. Lucille slowly walked over and gently placed the heavy pendant into her palm. But then he saw the wound on Anna's arm. The layers of white bandages had already been completely soaked red with blood. To Lucille, the sight was utterly shocking. He felt miserable inside, believing all of this had happened because of him. He stayed by the bed, whispering "I'm sorry" again and again to the unconscious Anna. Looking at her wound, Lucille sank completely into dark memories. Those vicious words churned through his mind like a nightmare. The maid had once pointed at his face and cursed him, saying he was a useless burden who only caused trouble. She had even cursed him, saying he had killed his own mother the moment he was born. Lucille had always believed that he was an ill-fated child, that everything precious would eventually be destroyed because of him. Just as he was about to break down, a firm voice suddenly rang in his ears. Anna was loudly refuting all that malice. She said, how could something like that possibly be blamed on a child? She looked at Lucille with nothing but gentleness and acceptance in her eyes. Word by word, she told him, Lucille, none of this is your fault. That simple sentence was like a ray of light, completely illuminating Lucille's cold heart. As he sat by the bed, only one thought remained in his mind. Please, wake up soon. He clutched the edge of the blanket as though it were his last lifeline. He wanted to hear her say it again with his own ears, that none of this was really his fault. In his hazy consciousness, Anna was standing in the sunlight, smiling brightly at him. It was the gentlest light he had ever seen in his life. Lucille couldn't hold on any longer. He collapsed beside the bed and cried out loud. He didn't care about being a duke's son. Right now, he only wanted to hear her voice. That night, Lucille stayed by her side, waiting for the miracle that could finally set him free. In a dazed haze, Anna finally opened her eyes. She looked up at the ceiling, not immediately realizing where she was. But when she tried to sit up, she froze. She instinctively looked toward her arm, hardly able to believe what she was seeing. All those horrifying wounds were gone. Beneath the scattered bandages, her skin was perfectly whole again. There wasn't even the slightest trace of injury left. When the world had happened, had some miracle occurred? Before she could sort it out, she suddenly sensed someone at her bedside. Turning her head, she saw Lucille. The little boy had fallen asleep with his head resting against her leg, still clutching the blanket tightly in his hand. It looked like he had stayed there watching over her all night. Since his injuries seemed healed, she had wanted to let him sleep a little longer, but the child woke up surprisingly quickly. Lucille was clearly startled too. Once he realized what was happening, he hurriedly apologized, saying he hadn't meant to do it and had only accidentally fallen asleep there. Lucille kept apologizing, saying he shouldn't have fallen asleep there, and even thanked Anna for worrying about him. It was obvious the child still couldn't let it go. He felt he hadn't taken care of her properly, and even worried she might catch a cold because of him. Anna had no intention of blaming him. But just then, Lucille suddenly tugged on the hem of her clothes. Lowering his head, he carefully asked if all of this really wasn't his fault. That one question was heartbreaking. Lucille finally voiced what had been buried in his heart. He had always believed he was the one who killed his mother, that he was a bad child who only made mistakes. He had even blamed Anna's injury entirely on himself. The child had clearly trapped himself in a dead end. Anna remembered the Duke once saying that because of negligence, Lucille had indeed not received enough love and care when he was younger. Looking at the child curled up tightly in front of her, Anna pulled him into her arms, her tone utterly firm. She told him it wasn't true. None of this was Lucille's fault. The thorn that had been lodged in the child's heart for years was finally about to be pulled out. Anna made it absolutely clear. Neither her injury nor his mother's death had anything to do with Lucille. Seeing the disbelieving look on his face, Anna promised that even if she had to say it thousands upon thousands of times, she would keep telling him this truth. This absolutely wasn't Lucille's fault. If once wasn't enough, then she'd say it twice, again and again, until he truly believed it. Lucille stood there stunned, asking over and over in a small voice if it really wasn't his fault. After receiving a firm answer, the little boy who had been tense for so long finally broke completely. He couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears in front of Anna, crying as if he wanted to pour out all the grievances he had held in for years. At that moment, he finally became a child again. Lucille cried his heart out in her arms, as though he wanted to vent every bit of pain he had been storing up all these years. When he finally stopped crying, he still didn't want to leave, mumbling softly that he wanted to stay a little longer. But he was still afraid, worried that his father and brothers would be angry, because he had always thought of himself as a burden. Anna saw through his concerns and directly suggested that they go see them together right now. Some things had to be said by Lucille himself before the heavy stone in his heart could truly be lifted. Looking at Anna's confident smile, Lucille finally stopped being afraid. A long-lost smile appeared on his face. This time, they planned to face it together. Seeing Lucille finally nod, Anna felt warmth spread through her heart. For the first time, she truly felt glad she had come to this family. But the warm atmosphere didn't last long. The door was suddenly flung open, and Edwin burst in recklessly, searching the entire room for his precious little brother and Anna. Anna had just been about to scold him for barging into a girl's room without knocking, but Edwin wasn't in the mood to listen. He stared at Anna's arm and froze. The frightening wound that had been there had disappeared as if by magic. It really was strange. Anna herself couldn't explain it, so she could only joke that maybe it was some mysterious noble power. But Edwin was clearly not that easy to fool. He suddenly leaned in close, his eyes full of suspicion. Things seemed to be getting strange again. Edwin hastily made up an excuse, saying there was a spider on the bedsheet. That was why he had suddenly leaned in so close. But he quickly remembered something important. Anna's magic beast was about to be executed. Just an hour earlier, in the ducal office, the air had been so oppressive it was hard to breathe. The maid had been tattling to Will Hart, blaming the entire accident from yesterday on Anna. She said Anna had ignored Lucille's weak condition and insisted on dragging him outside. As the maid's accusations became more and more absurd, Will Hart coldly cut her off. He had called the maid here to hear what had actually happened, not to listen to this embellished nonsense. Will Hart was always clear-headed. Trying to play these petty tricks in front of him was simply asking for trouble. The maid was so frightened that she shut up on the spot, not even daring to raise her head. It seemed the waters in this ducal household ran far deeper than expected. This maid was an old hand in the estate. She had been by Lucille's side since he was 1 year old, so in theory she should have been one of the most trusted people here. Even their father had personally said she was steady and reliable. Lucille, even more so, depended on her deeply and often praised her as a gentle, kind person. But the more Will Hart thought about it, the more something felt wrong. If she were really that kind, why had every word she spoke just now been soaked in prejudice? She was clearly steering the narrative, trying to dump all the blame onto Anna. Will Hart had already come to a conclusion. He wouldn't fully believe a single word of such one-sided accusations. If he wanted the truth, he would have to hear what Anna had to say. The maid's scheme seemed destined to fail. Then the maid dropped another bombshell. She said that as soon as Lucille returned to his room, he had started smashing his toys. She even explained that he had always been like this since childhood, that whenever he was under too much stress, he liked taking it out on the things around him. As she spoke, she wiped away tears, putting on a self-blaming act and saying she had failed to care for her young master properly. After hearing this, Will Hart fell into thought. Things in Lucille's room did often get broken, and the child himself had admitted as much. On the surface, it seemed to fit. But then the maid's tone suddenly turned sinister. She hinted darkly that perhaps Anna had done something to Lucille. This was no longer mere reporting. It was blatant sowing of discord. Will Hart stared at her coldly, without saying a word. The maid's true colors were finally beginning to show. In the dead of night, the three of them were actually sneaking around together. Anna's heart was pounding. In this pitch-black darkness, Had they really found the right place? Edwin looked impatient and said he had seen with his own eyes where that creature had been taken. If she was scared, she could still turn back now. Though Lucille was terrified, he still insisted on moving forward. After all, the one locked up in there was his most important friend. Then a problem arose. The main door was locked tight, and they couldn't get in at all. Just as Anna was worrying over it, Edwin actually pulled out a huge ring of keys. It turned out he had prepared a backup plan long ago. The boy's nerve was unbelievable. Edwin himself didn't seem bothered at all. He said he had never been trusted anyway, so one more crime on his head didn't matter. Anna couldn't stay quiet after hearing that. Afraid Edwin would be hated by their eldest brother, she hurriedly suggested they could just say she had stolen the keys, and if anyone was going to be punished, let it be her alone. But Edwin didn't appreciate that at all. He laughed at her for being an idiot, saying a goody-two-shoes like her would never know where the keys were hidden. Seeing Lucille apologizing nonstop beside them, Edwin finally dropped the smug attitude. He took his little brother's hand and said there was no need to apologize. Weren't they friends? And besides, he was still his brother, wasn't he? In an instant, the tense atmosphere turned unexpectedly warm. Then things went bad. They had been caught red-handed. Before they could even unlock the door, the maid rushed in with others. She had clearly planned this in advance. The moment she opened her mouth, she began throwing around accusations, pointing straight at Anna and saying, "I knew you were behind this." She had even deliberately brought their eldest brother Wilhart over to witness it and make her accusations in person, saying the young lady was trying to use the magic beast and even lead the young master astray. Wilhart's expression turned cold to the extreme. He ignored the maid's shrill clamor and instead fixed Edwin with an unrelenting stare, his tone full of pressure. He demanded to know how Edwin, as an older brother, could not only fail to stop Lucille, but actually bring him to a place like this. Faced with their eldest brother's oppressive presence, Anna stepped forward at once, shielding the two younger boys behind her. She said, "Big brother, if you're this fierce, who would dare tell the truth?" Wilhart didn't appreciate her interruption at all. Coldly, he reminded her, "I'm disciplining Edwin right now. I didn't ask you to speak." But Anna had already steeled herself. She simply took over the explanation for her brothers. She said they had come tonight to let the wolf go, because in Lucille's heart, this wasn't some dangerous magic beast at all. It was his most important friend. So they absolutely couldn't just leave it to be disposed of by others. She had thought those words might move their eldest brother, but Wilhart only let out a cold laugh and said they understood nothing. Staring at Anna, he asked one final question. Did she know what this so-called docile magic beast had been raised on before? What Wilhart said next silenced everyone. He said this magic beast had eaten human flesh before. Its nature had already completely changed. A creature stained with blood that could never be released back into the forest. The only possible end for it was execution. Just as their eldest brother was about to pronounce the death sentence, Lucille, who had been hiding behind everyone else, suddenly ran to the front. Crying, the child begged his brother not to kill it. Even if everyone else called him a monster, he didn't want to let go. In the end, Lucille made a decision. He shouted that he would bear all the consequences himself, as long as the wolf's life could be spared. No one had expected that the most timid child in the family would show such courage at a moment like this. Seeing young Lucille kneeling on the ground and insisting on taking responsibility for everything, Wilhart actually nodded. He said that if Lucille had that much nerve, then the whole mess would be his to bear this time. Anna's heart ached at the sight. She quickly bowed her head and admitted fault, acknowledging that it was she who had led this reckless plan and dragged the younger boys into danger. She even set aside all her pride and pleaded with her eldest brother to show mercy and see if there was any other way to spare the magic beast's life. At that moment, something suddenly stirred in Wilhart's cold heart. In his mind echoed his mother's old words, telling him that at times he was far too harsh on others. He also remembered his sister shouting at him that, as an older brother, he should teach his younger siblings what to do instead of only blaming them. Looking at the family before him, desperately trying to save a monster, the cold eldest son of the Duke fell silent for the first time. The situation seemed to be turning. But would Big Brother truly challenge the family's rules for their sake? No one expected Wilhart to relent. He stared at Lucille and asked if he truly wanted to take responsibility for this magic beast. After getting a firm answer, He proposed the only possible solution. Lucille would have to form a soul contract with the wolf. Once the contract was established, the magic beast would feed on Lucille's magic power and be completely tamed from then on, never attacking humans again. But this was no blessing. It was a life-risking bargain. Because once the contract was formed, their lives would be completely bound together. If anything happened to Lucille, the magic beast would die with him. But if the magic beast died, Lucille would also suffer a terrifying backlash. The maid beside them was horrified on the spot, shrieking that this was absolutely impossible. This wasn't saving the wolf at all. It was gambling with the young master's life. Though the maid spoke as if out of concern, what filled her heart was dirty calculation. She believed that if the magic beast remained, it would ruin the private time she had with Lucille. Willhart saw through her instantly and coldly reminded her to remember her place. As a servant, she had no right to interfere in her master's decisions. Those words completely shattered the maid. She began screaming hysterically, saying she had taken care of Lucille since he was small and had spent more time with him than anyone else. Inwardly, she all but screamed that her feelings for Lucille had long surpassed those of servant and master. The sick obsession in her gaze was enough to make anyone shudder. Just as she was drowning in her own self-righteous emotion, Anna suddenly let out a cold laugh and asked her one question. Were all those things she said really true? That made the maid explode. She desperately tried to argue back, saying she had cared for Lucille since childhood and that Anna's words were insulting. But Anna didn't buy a word of it. With one sentence, she exposed the lie. When a magic beast appeared, didn't you abandon Lucille and run for your own life first? The maid was left speechless, but Anna still had no intention of letting her off. Lucille had actually been calling this maid madam. The more Anna thought about it, the more wrong it seemed. How could a noble family's young master possibly call a servant madam? And in front of her, Lucille acted as if he were walking a tightrope. Those words ripped the maid's disguise to pieces. She instantly lost control and lunged at Lucille like a madwoman, muttering over and over that it wasn't true. Fixing Lucille with a wild stare, she began frantically trying to guilt him. She asked if Lucille understood her best, if he liked her the most. Seeing Lucille shrink into himself in terror, Anna finally understood. Just what kind of horrifying psychological torment had this child been enduring all this time? Anna knew very well that no matter what anyone else said, the most important thing was that Lucille had to say it himself. Seeing the encouraging look in Anna's eyes, Lucille finally summoned his courage. Hiding behind her, he pointed at the maid kneeling on the ground and said, "I'm really afraid of this person." The entire room went silent. The maid froze. She had never imagined that this child, whom she had always kept under control, would dare resist. Clutching Anna's clothes tightly, Lucille poured out all the grievances he had buried for so long. He said she often hit him and kept telling him everything was his fault. This was no mere negligence. It was outright abuse. Now, no one could protect the maid anymore. Lucille completely broke down this time, crying as he shouted that his mother had already died long ago. That single sentence made everyone present go stiff. He spilled out all the pain he had bottled up inside. He hadn't broken the toys. He had long since grown sick of that suffocating kind of care. Looking at the maid's hypocritical face, Lucille shouted with all his strength, "I don't like you at all. You're not my mother." The maid finally snapped and revealed her true face. Clenching her fists, she roared at the child, "You ungrateful little brat. Do you even know who raised you?" Just as she was about to lose it completely, an icy voice cut straight through the scene. Enough. Willhart was serious now. The cold blade of a sword was pressed directly against the maid's neck. He coldly reminded her that he had already said this was not a matter a mere servant could interfere in. Seeing her still in a daze, Willhart had clearly run out of patience. He asked whether he needed to repeat himself a second time. At that moment, the guards who had rushed over after hearing the commotion charged into the room. Without even turning his head, Willhart issued his final order, "Arrest this maid." The maid was completely dumbfounded. She still tried to argue, but Willhart had no desire to hear another word. He directly ordered the guards to drag her away. This woman, who had lorded over the ducal estate for years, had finally met the ending she deserved. She was hauled off like a stray dog. Even though she was still screaming hysterically, everyone present knew her good days were truly over. As the noise gradually faded into the distance, the previously oppressive corridor finally fell quiet. Just then, the little white wolf suddenly ran out and obediently stayed by Lucille's side. Willhart put away the killing intent he had shown earlier and slowly crouched down for the first time meeting the younger brother he had long neglected as an equal. In a calm tone, he said, "All right, now let's return to our earlier subject. Lucille, how do you want to deal with it?" On that very day, the order dismissing the maid was formally issued. But that was only the beginning. The years of abuse she had inflicted on Lucille, along with all her lies, would now be settled one by one. Off to the side, Edwin counted on his fingers and casually estimated that destruction of property plus abuse of nobility would be enough to ruin her. Even if it didn't kill her, she'd lose half her life, and losing a hand or a leg was practically unavoidable. Although the villain had gotten her retribution, the shadows in Lucille's heart had not yet disappeared. The moment anyone mentioned assigning him a new maid, he shrank into himself in fear. Seeing his little brother like that, Anna stepped forward at once. "There's no need to find anyone else. From now on, I'll take care of Lucille." Anna meant what she said. In the days that followed, she was almost inseparable from Lucille, and the little magic beast that had caused all the chaos formally entered into a contract with him as well. Then something amazing happened. The little creature, which had originally been dull gray, suddenly began to glow all over the instant the contract was formed and turned pure white like snow. Both Edwin and Anna were stunned. Willhart explained from the side that a contracted beast form could change according to its master's magic power. It seemed the little creature had truly taken a liking to Lucille. While everyone was gathered around the magic beast, the usually cold Willhart suddenly walked over to Anna and asked how her injury was doing. That unexpected concern left Anna completely stunned. Was this really the same cold-faced eldest brother who only knew how to work? If Willhart hadn't brought it up, Anna would have nearly forgotten about the injury herself. Strangely enough, when she had woken up yesterday, all the wounds on her body had vanished. Willhart fell silent for a long while after hearing that. Thoughtfully, he rubbed his chin, as if he had sensed something strange. But he said nothing more. Instead, in an unprecedented move, he lowered his head and quietly said that he had been too arrogant yesterday. Before learning the truth, he had said many excessive things, and he was truly sorry. That one apology left Anna completely stunned. Before she could react, Willhart added another sentence. He thanked her for everything she had done for Lucille. Looking at the two younger brothers in the distance, his tone turned serious. A child who had just formed a contract had unstable magic, and his body could easily have problems. He asked Anna to keep a close eye on Lucille in the coming days. It seemed that this time, Anna had finally won her eldest brother's trust through her actions. After hearing his instructions, Anna patted her chest and confidently promised that he could leave it all to her. Watching Willhart walk away, Anna couldn't help sighing. Though their eldest brother usually seemed like some cold-faced god of ice, when it truly mattered, he wasn't all that bad. She had thought that after dealing with the biggest boss in the house, life would get a little easier. But reality quickly slapped her in the face. After that whole incident, the maid's attitude toward Anna not only failed to improve, it became even more passive-aggressive. She only politely asked a maid for a glass of water, and the woman didn't even turn her head. She simply treated Anna as if she didn't exist. It seemed that if Anna wanted to secure her place in this house, her eldest brother's trust alone was nowhere near enough. These servants really had some nerve. Anna spent her days caring for her younger brother, and they actually started treating her like an easy errand girl. She didn't want to trouble Willhart with every little issue. But when she reached the kitchen, it was already in utter chaos. The cook was shouting at people all over the place. Everyone was running around so busily that no one paid the young lady any mind at all. Just then, a maid spotted her. Not only did she fail to show proper respect, she acted as if reinforcements had arrived and directly shoved a plate of pastries into Anna's hands. The maid brazenly said, "Miss, you came at the perfect time. Hurry and take this to Lord Julius. You only need to knock on the door." Before Anna could even process what was happening, these people had pushed her into it. She ended up standing in the corridor with a tray in her hands. Clearly, these servants had fully decided to treat her like a maid. It was blatant bullying pushing all the lowly errand work onto Anna. But when she looked down at the tray, she was dumbfounded. It was just one tiny sandwich, barely enough to fill the gap between Lucille's teeth. How could this possibly be a noble's meal? The more Anna walked, the stranger it all felt. Thinking carefully, from the very first day she had entered this house, the second brother, named Julius, had practically vanished off the face of the earth. When such a huge incident had happened to Lucille, this blood-related older brother hadn't even shown his face. In a ducal household, that was far too abnormal. Looking at the meager lunch in her hands, a frightening thought suddenly surfaced. Could it be that besides Lucille, someone else in this house was also suffering inhuman abuse? At that thought, Anna couldn't stay calm any longer. Her heart leapt in her throat. Taking a deep breath, she knocked hard on the tightly shut door. As it slowly opened, Anna was left completely stunned. This was nothing like what she had imagined. The silver-haired man before her was so beautiful he looked almost unreal. Could this be Julius, the brother who had never shown himself? Julius glanced at the sky, then at the pitiful little amount of food on the tray, and only said calmly, "So it's not lunchtime yet." He took the tray and turned to close the door, clean and direct, without the slightest intention of letting Anna enter. Seeing she was about to be shut out, Anna quickly reached out to stop him and shouted for him to wait. She had finally met the man himself. This couldn't end so abruptly. Julius looked utterly cold, clearly with no intention of being polite. The situation instantly turned awkward. Anna had no idea how to continue the conversation. Seeing the tiny amount of lunch in his hands, she had just started to say a few words of concern when he coldly cut her off with, "Mind your own business," and shut the door in her face. That cold reception really left her unsettled. It seemed this Julius was even harder to deal with than she had imagined. Anna could only go ask Edwin about him. The moment Julius was mentioned, even her younger brother's expression changed. Clearly, there were many secrets in this house that no one dared mention when it came to Julius. Looking impatient, Edwin explained that Julius was even more mysterious than the sickly Lucille. He shut himself in his room all day and gave face to no one. Now, Anna finally understood. Julius had once been closest to his mother, and ever since her death, he had completely changed. His relationship with their father had also turned extremely tense. No wonder his personality was so strange. He had clearly been carrying something heavy in his heart all this time. As Edwin spoke, he suddenly caught himself and wondered why he was telling Anna so much. Looking at this little brother who had a sharp tongue but a soft heart, Anna couldn't help wanting to laugh. Though he claimed he didn't want to help, at the critical moment he still stood on her side. But Julius's emotional knot would probably not be easy to untangle. The road ahead would only get harder. Edwin was still acting tough off to the side, saying Anna was sticking her nose in too many things. Just then, Lucille, who had been hiding behind them, walked up on his own initiative. The little boy politely greeted them first, then softly asked Anna's name. After spending so much time together, he still hadn't formally gotten to know this older sister. Anna smiled and told him, "Just call me Anna." Hearing that name, Lucille's eyes lit up, and he praised it as very beautiful. At last, the atmosphere softened. Lucille pointed at the little white wolf beside him and asked everyone to help give a name. After all, this was his new companion. Both Anna and Edwin felt that something this important should be decided by Lucille himself. But the little boy suddenly hesitated. He lowered his head and clutched his clothes, clearly lacking confidence in himself. Holding the little wolf in her arms, Anna gently encouraged Lucille. Whatever name he gave it, it would definitely love it, because he was the one it cared about most. After hearing that, the little boy seemed thoughtful. Suddenly, he looked up and asked whether Anna would also be happy when someone called her by name. After receiving a positive answer, he smiled more brightly than anyone else and said he would call her that more often in the future. Just as the atmosphere was turning warm, Edwin, who had been standing nearby the whole time, found an excuse and said he had to go back to training. His awkward personality really hadn't changed at all. Anna hurriedly called out to stop him and sincerely thanked him for being willing to share those family secrets just now. Unexpectedly, that one "thank you" made this Sundra little brother call her by name for the first time, Anna. Though he still wore that same indifferent expression, the iceberg in his heart had clearly begun to crack. Watching Edwin's retreating figure, Anna felt warmth in her heart. It seemed that everyone in this family was slowly opening up to her. Even though Edwin had warned her not to bother Julius, since they lived under the same roof, Anna couldn't help being curious. She deliberately went to the kitchen to ask around, hoping to see whether she could help. But the maids quickly waved their hands and said that yesterday had only happened because someone was on leave, and today they would never dare trouble the young lady again. Only then did Anna realize that Julius had once been closest to his mother. To him, Anna and her mother were strangers who had suddenly intruded into his life. Anyone in his place would probably find that hard to accept. Seeing Julius's cold attitude, Anna finally had a better grasp of things. If all he held in his heart was his birth mother, then forcing concern onto him would only become a burden. Putting herself in his place, Anna knew her own mother was also an irreplaceable treasure. Since everyone had someone they wanted to protect, then perhaps it was better to keep some distance. Anna turned and left, no longer trying to knock on that tightly closed door. Some knots in the heart could perhaps only be left to time. Anna knew very well that if someone else were discussing her own mother, she would also lose her temper. Rather than stay here and argue endlessly, she might as well hurry back and keep Lucio company. But just as she was preparing to leave, a melodious violin suddenly drifted from the far end of the corridor. The tune was so beautiful that she stopped in spite of herself. Following the sound, Anna discovered that the music was coming from a room. Looking carefully, wasn't this Julius's room? The moment she pushed the door open, the scene before her left her completely stunned. The usually cold Julius was standing alone by the window, playing the violin. Sunlight spilled over him. The scene was so beautiful it hardly seemed real. Who could have imagined that Julius, who always kept everyone at arm's length, could play such a gentle piece? The contrast was astonishing. Anna stood outside the door, her hand half raised before slowly pulling it back. She didn't want to interrupt such a beautiful moment, so she simply leaned against the doorway and listened in silence. The melody was so gentle, yet it carried an indescribable sadness. As Anna listened, she felt as though she had returned to the past and seen the figure of her mother in her memories. It felt like the sunset you see when you close your eyes, bittersweet yet warm. She became completely immersed in the music, even forgetting that she was eavesdropping. Then suddenly, the music stopped. The door abruptly opened. Julius looked down at her and asked in a cool tone, "Were you listening the whole time?" The situation was instantly awkward. Anna hadn't even had time to wipe away her tears before she was caught red-handed. Faced with this unpredictable second brother, how was she supposed to explain herself? Julius looked impatient and was just about to tell her coldly that if she had heard enough, she should get lost. But before he could finish, he froze, because he realized Anna was crying. That sight instantly made him think of his own mother. In his memories, that gentle woman had once stroked his head and looked at him with that same expression. Julius was thrown completely off balance. The coldness in his eyes turned complicated. This was the kind of scene he was worst at dealing with. Anna was so flustered that she hurriedly apologized and ran off while covering her face. Julius was left alone in the empty corridor, irritably running a hand through his hair, his mind in complete disarray. This woman who had suddenly appeared really was troublesome. Anna jogged all the way, wanting only to escape that awkward place as quickly as possible. The scene from just now was still a complete mess in her head, but before she could even catch her breath, she ran straight into one of the household maids at the corner of the corridor. Anna sat alone in her room. That performance just now had truly been wonderful, yet the more she listened, the more an inexplicable ache filled her chest. She had clearly reminded herself that she absolutely must not get dragged into these troublesome family matters. She had to keep her distance from them. But by now, if she wanted to pull away completely, it was probably no longer that simple. And a plan to sneak back there quietly. As long as she didn't show herself, she shouldn't be discovered, right? She kept making excuses for herself. Since they all lived under the same roof, casually passing by was perfectly normal. It definitely wasn't because she wanted to meddle again. In truth, she knew very well that she simply wanted to hear that melody one more time. But the more she walked, the stranger the route looked. She had clearly memorized the layout of the house, and yet now she had completely gotten turned around, just as she stood there at a loss. A voice suddenly called her name from behind. Just her luck. Before Anna could find her way out, she was caught by Edwin. With his arms folded over his head, he looked at her suspiciously and asked, "Don't tell me you came to steal something again?" That nearly made Anna explode with anger. But before she could explain, he shoved open a door with obvious annoyance. Apparently, he had taken her for some ignorant little thief. Though she felt wronged, she still followed him inside. When she looked at the painting on the wall, Anna suddenly froze. Everything here looked exactly the same as in her memory. She stopped walking and softly called to Edwin, who was ahead of her. What she was about to say might completely change the relationship between them. Looking at the covered painting on the wall, Anna curiously asked what it was. Edwin said nothing. He simply reached out and pulled the cord. A long-concealed family portrait appeared before the two of them. It was a scene from when their mother was still alive, every person in the painting dressed neatly. But Anna quickly noticed that one person alone was missing from the painting, the youngest brother, Lucille. In an even tone, Edwin said that their mother had died giving birth to him. So afterward, the painting had been covered with cloth. He turned around, seeming not to care about those past events at all. He even said things like this were too depressing. In any case, he didn't have many memories of their mother. Looking at his detached expression, Anna cautiously asked whether the brothers usually didn't spend time together. Did they not even eat meals together? Edwin fell silent for a moment and casually gave a short response. Now it was Anna's turn to feel awkward. She quickly explained that she had just assumed noble families gathered together. But behind the cold walls of this house, there seemed to be a deeper division than she had imagined. Edwin gave a cold snort and said commoners were the ones who liked crowding together as a family. Anna couldn't bear to hear that and told him to show a little more respect when he spoke. He went quiet for a moment, then muttered under his breath that when their mother had still been alive, they really had eaten together. But he quickly returned to his usual irritable self, saying that none of that mattered. After all, servants attended to everything, and even if they never met, no one would die. As he urged Anna to leave, he also tried to cover up his own wavering emotions. It seemed every person in this family was desperately pushing the others away. Late that night, Anna went to the study to report Lucille's condition over the past few days to her eldest brother Wilhart. Without even lifting his head, Wilhart only coldly replied that he understood, then dismissed her and told her to go rest. Looking at the way he buried himself in official work, Anna knew very clearly that if she wanted to melt the ice in this family, she still had a very long road ahead. Taking a deep breath, Anna called out to Wilhart just as he was about to continue working. Summoning her courage, she proposed that maybe everyone could have a meal together from now on. Wilhart stopped what he was doing and looked up at her. There wasn't the slightest ripple in his eyes. He only coldly asked one question. Why? Anna had always thought that the brothers refused to come to the table because they disliked her, the Duke's daughter, by remarriage. She even recalled how, when she was little, the dining table had usually held only herself and her parents. She had originally believed everyone stayed in their separate rooms because they wanted to avoid her. But the truth was even crueler than she had imagined. Wilhart calmly picked up his pen again, his indifferent tone chilling to the bone. He said there was absolutely no need for such a thing and directly rejected her goodwill. Only then did Anna realize that it wasn't that everyone was targeting her. This family had long since been living separate lives. Anna finally understood that this household's coldness had existed long before she ever appeared. This wasn't her fault. Even so, she still wanted to try one more time, softly suggesting that maybe they could at least have breakfast together, even if it was only for one meal. Wilhart was beginning to sound irritated. He coldly replied that everyone's schedules were different, so there was no point in such a thing. Anna still refused to give up, believing that if people truly wanted to do something, they could always make time. But before she could finish, he mercilessly cut her off. Wilhart set down his pen, his voice so cold it made one shiver. He bluntly said that this was none of her business. Staring at Anna, he asked why she was so determined to meddle. His final sentence cut deepest of all. After all, he said, she and they were complete strangers. Wilhart was silent for a long time before finally relenting slightly. He admitted that some of what she said did make sense, and he thanked her for everything she had done for Lucille. Anna thought things had softened between them and quickly emphasized that they were family now. But before she could finish, Willhart poured cold water over her hopes. Looking at her expressionlessly, he said word by word that he had never acknowledged her as a member of this ducal family. Looking at the long, empty dining table, Anna finally realized that in this house, she had always been an outsider who did not belong. Seeing Lucille's innocent smile, she couldn't understand why such a simple wish had become an impossible luxury here. But she had no intention of backing down. She argued loudly that this wasn't only for her own sake. Lucille surely wanted to eat with his family too. Willhart remained unmoved. Coldly, he declared that the whole family gathering around one table to eat was absolutely impossible. Anna was completely worked up now. She pressed him for the reason. Was this family really beyond saving? Willhart sighed and directly used Julius as his excuse. He said that man's personality was too strange and that there was absolutely no chance he would show up, so Anna should give up sooner rather than later. Anna said nothing at first. She only stared at him and asked whether that was truly the only reason. With absolute confidence, Anna said that if that was the case, then she would go persuade Julius. But the moment she turned around, she immediately felt troubled. Her words had sounded bold enough, but now she couldn't even get a proper chance to see him. He was probably already annoyed with her. Just as she was about to lose heart, a voice suddenly came from behind her. "Hey, Anna." She froze and turned around. To her surprise, it was Edwin. Edwin mysteriously leaned in and asked whether Anna wanted to see something. He pulled a pile of fragments from his pocket and said helplessly, this was a toy mother prepared for Lucille. But unfortunately, it's completely broken now. Anna's heart sank. This was a keepsake left behind by their mother. If Lucille saw it, he would never be able to bear the shock. Lowering his voice, Edwin warned her that Lucille absolutely could not be allowed to see it. They had to think of something quickly. Just then, Lucille came over carrying the little wolf and asked curiously what they were talking about. The two of them were so startled that they quickly hid their hands behind their backs and shouted in unison, "Nothing. Really, it's nothing." Lucille proudly held up the little wolf and said he had named it Coco because the book said that coconuts turn white after being washed clean. And now the little wolf had been washed nice and clean too. Anna and Edwin exchanged a glance. At that moment, they both understood what he meant by wash clean. It clearly wasn't that it had turned white at all. He had just washed off all the dirt stuck to its fur. Anna felt completely fooled. She was just about to rush over and hug her silly little brother when Edwin covered his mouth and muttered beside her, "This isn't clean. It's too awful to look at." Just as the group was making a fuss together, a voice suddenly came from behind them. "Anna." The moment he heard it, his whole body froze. Anna suddenly got an idea. Since their mother's keepsake had broken, they could use this ribbon in its place for now. Edwin immediately understood and quickly called Lucille over. The two of them busied themselves in secret for a while. Looking at the blue bow on Lucille's head, Anna smiled and asked, "How is it? Isn't it especially cute?" She gently hugged her timid little brother. "Once you wear this, we'll always be together from now on." Lucille blankly repeated the words, "always together." At last, he showed the brightest smile. Then Anna suddenly suggested that, since everyone was here, why not have lunch together today? Edwin froze when he heard that. He was used to being alone, and he had just been about to refuse, but Anna gave him no chance. "You'll be eating anyway, so why not eat together? It's livelier that way." Lucille also chimed in from the side, gazing at Edwin with pleading eyes and asking if they could all eat together. Faced with that look from his little brother, Edwin instantly lost all resistance. He could only agree helplessly and turn to tell the maids to prepare the meal. Watching the two younger boys getting along so well, Anna quietly tightened her grip on the broken fragments in her hand. She told herself that for the sake of this family, she absolutely could not back down. Edwin noticed that something was off about her expression and asked with concern, "Anna, are you all right?" She hurriedly tucked away her thoughts and smiled as she shook her head. Perhaps the real change would begin with this lunch. Anna just put on a brave front in front of her younger brothers, saying she would go speak to that person again. But the moment she turned around, all her courage vanished. Who would have thought she would actually get lost inside her own mansion? No matter what, she couldn't find Julius's room. She had clearly asked for directions on purpose earlier, yet in the blink of an eye, she had forgotten them completely. Just as she was anxiously spinning in circles, a voice suddenly came from behind her. "What are you doing?" Anna was startled badly. Looking at the expressionless maid in front of her, she could only awkwardly make up an excuse, saying she was just taking a walk. The maid didn't bite at all. In a cold voice, she replied, "There's nothing here. Please return at once." That was downright humiliating. Anna could only apologize as she slunk back the way she had come. It seemed seeing Julius would be even harder than she had imagined. As Anna walked down the stairs, the more she thought about it, the stranger it felt. She suddenly stopped in her tracks. That maid just now had been carrying a plate with a sandwich on it. At this hour, who besides that mysterious Julius would have the kitchen specially prepare a snack? She had finally caught a clue. So Julius's room was hidden in that very place. She excitedly ran back to her room and told her younger brothers about this great discovery. But after listening, Edwin looked at her with utter disdain and mocked her for being an idiot. Lucille, however, was frightened and softly asked, "Julius, can brother disappear into thin air?" Now, they had a problem. They had found a clue, but how to get inside was still a major issue. Edwin looked helpless, thinking Anna was talking nonsense again, and even warned her not to scare their little brother, because how could a door possibly disappear out of nowhere? Anna was hopping in frustration, insisting that she had seen the door vanish with her own eyes. Driven mad by her persistence, Edwin finally agreed to take them there and see for himself. Lucio looked at his brother with admiration. Edwin could only grit his teeth and lead them back to the corridor from before. He crouched down and inspected the area carefully. Just then, he picked up something shiny from the corner of the wall. The situation instantly flipped. So this wasn't some supernatural event at all. Edwin calmly analyzed the situation. Julius must have used some magical trinket to deliberately hide the door to his room. Let's see how much longer he can keep hiding now. Edwin held a purple gemstone in his hand. This thing could project the appearance of its surroundings. No wonder that wall had looked so strange earlier. It turned out to be an illusion Julius had set up. As Edwin tapped on the wall, he mercilessly mocked Anna, saying that if she had just touched it once, she would have noticed. Lately, she couldn't even tell that a door had turned into a wall. She really was a huge idiot. Anna was furious and was about to retort when Edwin stabbed her again, saying that the reason she hadn't gone near the door was because she had a guilty conscience. Just as the two of them were arguing fiercely, the door behind them suddenly opened, and a cold voice came from inside. "What are you doing here?" No one was prepared for that. Julius had appeared before them completely without warning. The atmosphere instantly became awkward. Julius looked at Anna expressionlessly and coldly asked, "Did you need something from me?" Edwin handed over the ring and bluntly told Julius that this was the evidence they had found at his door. Julius took the ring, glanced at it, and in a chillingly flat tone admitted that it was indeed a magic ring that could hide things from sight. Then he asked in return how it had ended up by the door. Edwin had no intention of preserving his dignity. He directly stood up for Anna and said that, in trying to find him, she had nearly turned the entire ducal estate upside down. Julius let out a cold laugh after hearing that, and said it was only natural she couldn't find him. Edwin simply laid out plainly, "You were avoiding her on purpose because you didn't want to see her, weren't you?" Julius bluntly said that, in truth, he really didn't want to see Anna. Seeing everyone frozen in place, he then lightly added that he had only been joking. But that joke had gone much too far. As for the trap, Julius claimed he knew nothing about it, though he knew very well who had been behind it. No one expected this. He shifted all the blame onto the maid, saying that she knew he disliked visitors and had therefore set things up on her own initiative. Although he apologized in the end, his careless manner made it obvious that he hadn't taken the matter seriously at all. Anna realized that the Julius in front of her seemed rather different from the rumors. His tone was still icy, but at least he could communicate normally. Gathering her courage, she suggested that since everyone had eaten together in the past, maybe they could find a chance to sit down for a meal again. After all, days this desolate didn't feel like a real family. Julius did not refuse outright, but what he did next instantly made the atmosphere turn subtle. He suddenly interrupted Anna and told Edwin to take Lucille away first. Watching the two younger boys walk off, the corridor was left with just the two of them. Julius had sent the others away because he wanted to speak plainly. He coldly reminded Anna that she should first understand her own place and not casually overstep boundaries. As for the family's remarriage, he said outright that he was not opposed to it and had no intention of playing the villain, because he knew very well that he had no right to interfere. But that did not mean he was willing to let Anna meddle in his affairs. In his eyes, that kind of excessive concern only made her a nuisance. Julius made himself perfectly clear. He could manage non-interference, but Anna should stay away from him as well and stop trying to force her way into his life. After saying all that, he turned and left without looking back. It was clearly a warning to them both that from now on, they should keep to their own sides. Julius's words kept echoing in Anna's mind. That cold sense of distance made her begin to wonder if she really had been too self-important. It wasn't only Julius. Even Will Hart, the eldest brother, had said before that in the end they were nothing more than strangers. Anna felt deeply bitter about that. Could people living under the same roof really never become a family? Looking at little Lucille, Anna fell into thought. She had been doing her utmost to take care of him because she wanted, in this cold, ducal household, to preserve the last shred of warmth. Just then, a maid came to remind her that the bathwater was ready. Only then did Anna come back to herself and politely thanked her. But the maid's next reaction seemed somewhat strange. Looking at Anna, she hesitated before saying that the waters of this ducal household seemed deeper than one might imagine. Her words were unpleasant. She bluntly told Anna that taking care of Lucille had originally been the servant's job, and Anna insisting on doing it herself was simply taking their work away from them. Anna could only apologize awkwardly. She felt like she had been terribly unlucky lately. No matter what she did, she got scolded. She was practically a punching bag. In this house, no one stood on her side at all. Though she felt wronged inside, Anna still insisted on taking Lucille to bathe. She gently washed her little brother, wanting to use this method to bring a little warmth into this cold household. But just then, the usually silent Lucille suddenly spoke up. In a small voice, he apologized to Anna, saying that it was because of him that she had been scolded by the maid. Only then did Anna realize that he had seen the whole thing just now. Though he was still so young, he cared about her more than anyone. That made Anna's heart ache. Lucille understood very well that even if he tried to comfort her, Anna would still worry about him. But what he said next was something Anna never expected. He said that if taking care of him truly was troublesome, then that actually made him happy, because it meant Anna really cared about him. That feeling of being worried over made him feel safe. Anna was deeply moved by those words. She honestly told Lucille that she also felt rather lost in this house, as if she couldn't be of any help at all. It was precisely because Lucille relied on her that she no longer felt like an outsider. In this cold ducal estate, she had finally found a place that belonged to her. So she hoped Lucille would continue to rely on her from now on. Lucille cautiously asked if he had really been of help. After receiving a firm yes, the little boy who had been tense all this time finally showed the brightest smile. The sight of it was enough to melt anyone's heart. The more Anna looked at Lucille, the more she felt that this child coming into her life was a gift from heaven. She even began to imagine everyone someday sitting together for a proper family meal. Looking at Lucille's adorable face, Anna launched a direct attack and loudly told him that she really, truly loved him very, very much. Lucille had never faced anything like that before, so he shrank straight down into the bathwater, leaving only his wide eyes above the surface, and softly replied, "I love you too." But just in that warm moment, the scene shifted to the terrace late at night. Julius stood alone beneath the moonlight, his mind filled with Anna. He remembered the harsh words he had said earlier, telling her to stay away from him. And yet now, despite insisting that he would never feel guilty, his heart was already wavering. He was even struggling over whether he should really find a chance for them all to sit down and have a meal together. Julius thought it was a complete joke. Anna understood nothing and was self-righteously trying to bring everyone together. She had no idea what this family had gone through. In his memory, that funeral had been the turning point. After their mother died, their father shut himself away completely, and all the power in the ducal household fell into the hands of the eldest brother, Wilhart. People whispered in private that this family had changed completely. The eldest brother had taken their father's place and become the true master here. And Julius could only stand in the shadows and watch it happen. Just then, Julius suddenly felt unwell. A passing maid hurried over in concern and urged him not to push himself too hard, especially since his health had always been frail. But Julius's mind was not on that at all. He stared fixedly in the direction his older brother had gone, his eyes filled with coldness. In this household full of scheming and power struggles, could the little bit of naive warmth Anna brought really change anything? Eating a meal together, such an utterly ordinary request in a normal family, left Julius silent. He felt he had no face to see them right now. Thinking carefully, he couldn't even remember the last time he had seen his younger brother Lucille. That child had always been withdrawn, always shutting himself at his room. Ever since their mother died, Lucille had completely vanished from everyone's sight and had not taken a single step outside his room. As his older brother, Julius realized that he actually knew nothing about him. And yet now, that younger brother who had always sealed himself away had actually started to depend on Anna. This surprised Julius greatly. Looking at the moonlight, he thought of what their mother had been like in those days. Anna's appearance seemed to be breaking the long-frozen coldness of this family. But was he really ready to face all of that? I've been sickly since I was little. Even the slightest breeze would leave me miserable for ages. But my older brother, Wilhart, was a monster who never got sick. In everyone's eyes, he was the perfect heir. Precisely because of that, everyone was always especially lenient with me, to the point of indulging my every whim. When I was little, I didn't think anything was wrong with it. I thought life was simply supposed to be like that. But watching my older brother push himself past his limits every day, I suddenly realized that this so-called kindness only made me feel like I had nothing at all. It was around that time that Julius first came into contact with music. It felt as though the door to a new world had opened. But Anna, on the other hand, had no mind to appreciate any of that right now. Ever since yesterday, her thoughts had been in complete disarray. Julius's cold warning kept ringing in her ears. You need to have more sense of boundaries. Anna could think of nothing but, was I really being too annoying? Anna kept feeling that Julius didn't truly dislike his younger brothers. After all, he had still sent Lucille home first. Lucille came running over with a book in hand and asked Anna, I don't understand this part. Anna smiled and leaned closer. Which part? Let me see. She had thought it through so well. If everyone could sit down and have a meal together, Lucille and the others would surely be happy. But Julius's words that day had been like a bucket of cold water poured over her. You should keep your distance from me, too. Anna did not want to force him into anything. But over the next few days, the two of them did not exchange a single word. She could only occasionally pass by his door and wonder what was happening behind that tightly shut entrance. Behind that door, there was nothing but silence. Anna no longer heard Julius's violin at all. And it wasn't just her. Even the maids passing by were whispering to each other, wondering why they hadn't heard Lord Julius playing lately. That had been their only comfort while working. Anna felt a heavy weight settle in her heart. Could it be that her appearance that day had truly disrupted his rhythm? Seeing her lost in thought, Lucille softly called, Anna? She quickly forced a smile and waved her hand. It's nothing. Let's keep going. Just then, an unfamiliar maid suddenly blocked her path. Anna recognized her at once. She was one of Julius's attendants. This was bad. Had Julius sent someone to drive her away again? But to Anna's surprise, the maid bowed deeply and said that she had acted on her own and done something unnecessary that day, and had specially come to apologize to Anna. Anna froze for a moment before realizing she meant the earlier incident with the magical tool. She quickly waved her hand and said it was fine since it had been for Julius's sake. But the maid was rigid to a frightening degree. She said that as long as Lord Julius was displeased, her original intention did not matter at all. No matter how small the matter, she had to admit her mistake. Just as the maid was turning to leave, Anna quickly called out to stop her. After hesitating again and again, she finally asked the question that had been weighing on her heart. Why haven't I heard Julius playing lately? Did something happen? The maid stopped. Her answer made the atmosphere instantly turn strange. She suddenly leaned in mysteriously and asked Anna an odd question. Lady Anna, do you have any money on you? Before Anna could even react, she was already standing in front of Julius's door. The room was perfectly quiet. Julius was simply sitting there holding his violin with no light at all in his eyes. Hearing the knock, he asked without turning around, "Who's there?" Anna pushed open the door and was just about to speak when Julius coldly threw out, "You really never learn, do you?" He felt that no matter how many times Anna came, the result would not change. But this time, Anna had no intention of backing down. She immediately raised her voice and argued, "It's not like that." Looking straight into Julius's eyes, she said, "I just haven't heard your violin lately. I've honestly been hoping every day that I would hear it again." Anna kept desperately searching for excuses. She said she had only been worried that something had happened, like maybe his violin was broken. Julius casually plucked a string and let out a cold laugh without turning around. "Do you know something? You're really bad at lying." Anna panicked completely, stammering as she tried to explain that she really wasn't lying. She was just a little worried. But before she could finish, Julius suddenly stood up and pressed her straight into the corner by the door. One hand braced firmly against the door panel as he leaned close to Anna's ear. "Didn't your mother ever teach you that you can't just walk into a man's room with no caution at all like this?" This was bad. Anna had never expected things to develop in this direction. Anna hurriedly apologized, saying that she had grown up an only daughter and had hardly interacted with people her own age, so she really didn't know how much distance she was supposed to keep from others. If she had offended him just now, she was truly sorry. Julius was silent for a while. Then he suddenly reached out and touched her hair before sighing and asking, "About hearing that my violin was broken. Who exactly told you that?" Anna instantly felt guilty and stammered for a long time without being able to say anything. Julius turned away indifferently and said that even without asking, he could guess who it was. He told Anna that whether that person had meant well or not, it had nothing to do with her. If she thought she could curry favor with him this way, then she should give up and leave now. The moment Anna heard that, her temper flared. She loudly retorted, "I wasn't trying to curry favor with you." And just like that, what had begun as an attempt to comfort him only made their relationship even more strained. Anna finally told the truth. She admitted that she really had heard the violin was broken, and she apologized for it. But what she said next completely changed the atmosphere in the room. She said she truly wanted to hear him play. The first time she had heard that melody, she had been utterly shaken by it, to the point that she had wanted to keep listening for a lifetime. After that, she had passed by this room countless times, hoping only that she might hear that kind of sound again. Because Julius's music didn't simply enter her ears, it felt more as if it went straight into her heart. The feeling was both gentle and nostalgic, like a warm current spreading through her body. The more Anna spoke, the more emotional she became. She said that yes, she had wanted to talk to him, but even more than that, she wanted to hear him draw the bow across the strings again. But the moment the words left her mouth, she realized she had been far too direct and immediately started flusteredly fumbling for words. Just as she was speaking incoherently, Julius suddenly cut her off coldly. "Enough." Anna froze in place. Julius looked at the violin in his hands, his voice full of helplessness. He said it was just that the sound post had collapsed. He could make simple adjustments himself, but for a major problem like this, he needed a professional craftsman. Only then did Anna understand. So this was the reason he hadn't been able to play lately. But before she could offer any comfort, Julius suddenly said that playing the violin was only a hobby anyway. Since it was broken, he might as well take the opportunity to stop playing altogether. Anna was stunned and instinctively asked why. But Julius looked utterly unconcerned. "I told you, it's just a hobby. Why else?" Seeing how self-destructive he looked, Anna understood very clearly that it wasn't that he didn't care. He was simply on the verge of not being able to hold on anymore. Julius looked at the girl before him and suddenly seemed lost for a moment. He asked why Anna was wearing that kind of expression. It didn't suit the usual her at all. Perhaps moved by her sincerity, he finally relented and quietly said, "I understand." But before he could finish speaking, Anna's next words nearly made his jaw drop. With a serious face, she said, "Julius, if you don't have the money to repair the violin, I'll pay for it. Come on, let's go get your violin fixed right now."